A man was giving orders to his men from inside of a coffin. How did this happen? This is the story of Mafia boss Michael Franzese. 1976, Franzese was just 34 years old when he became the youngest boss in Mafia history. He was at the peak of his power and ruled over a criminal empire that stretched from New York to Las Vegas. But despite his success, Franzese's reign of terror would come crashing down around him after he made one fatal mistake. That was testifying against his former boss, Anthony, Fat Tony Salerno. Salerno had been the boss of the Genovese crime family for more than 2 decades, but he was eventually arrested for racketeering in 1976. Despite being loyal to Salerno for so long, the boss turned on him when he was given the choice between going down in a blaze of glory or cooperating with the authorities. Salerno chose the former, but it wasn't an option for Franzese. His wife and children were there too, and if he didn't cooperate, they would be the ones to suffer. So as much as it pained him, Franzese agreed to testify against his former boss. It proved to be a wise move, as it landed him a reduced sentence of only 5 years. But this decision caused a major rift in the Mafia, not only because the underboss had betrayed the boss, but also because he had broken the no. One rule of the Mafia: never rat on your own. As soon as he got out of prison, Franzese tried to lay low, but it wasn't long before other mobsters started targeting him. One day he was driving through Brooklyn when a white van cut off his car and parked in front of it. 4 men got out of the van, all of them armed. They opened the doors of Franzese's car and pulled him out. Then they drove off in both vehicles. Franzese's wife Camille received a phone call a few hours later informing her that her husband was now a member of the Missing Persons Club. She immediately went to the police, but they weren't interested. After all, he had testified against some of the most powerful mobsters in America. It was only a matter of time before they silenced him. The police couldn't get involved or else they would be putting themselves in danger. What they didn't know was that Franzese had managed to escape the clutches of his abductors. The men had taken him to an isolated farmhouse in New Jersey, but he managed to escape out of a window while they weren't looking. He then called his wife and told her to meet him at a prearranged location. But when she arrived, Franzese was nowhere to be seen. The next day, though, he showed up at their house and told his wife that he had gone into hiding. He knew that his life was now in danger, and he was afraid that his captors would come back for him. So he and his wife decided to go to the police. But once again, they were turned away. The police said that they couldn't offer him protection because he was a former mobster himself. It looked like Franzese was on his own, so he fled to California, where he thought he could start a new life. There he changed his name and got a job as a carpenter. But it was unlong before his past caught up with him, and his life was once again in danger. In 1986, he was nearly killed by a hit squad sent by the Bonanno crime family. But he survived the attempt on his life and continued to live in hiding for the next 20 years. During this time, he married one of his co-workers and started a new family. But he was constantly looking over his shoulder, afraid that he would be tracked down by the Mafia. Then in 2006, he got the news that he had been waiting for. He had been granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony against the Genovese crime family. This meant that he could finally put his past behind him and start a new life. But just as he thought he had gotten away with it, the Mafia came for him once again. In 2008, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for racketeering and extortion. But thanks to his cooperation with the authorities, he was able to make a plea bargain and reduce his sentence. He was sent to the same prison where he had first cooperated with the FBI, only this time as an inmate. He was able to continue his cooperation, and in 2011, he was moved to the Witness Protection Program. He was given a new identity and relocated to an undisclosed location. But just as he thought he had escaped the clutches of the Mafia in 2015, he was once again brought back to prison. He was charged with trying to extort money from a New York businessman by threatening to have him killed. But after serving only 6 months of his 1-year sentence, he was released. And once again, he went into hiding. This time he fled to Florida and started a new life as a handyman. But the Mafia wasn't finished with him yet. In 2017, he was arrested for allegedly trying to extort money from a restaurant owner in Las Vegas. But this time, the case against him was weak, and he was acquitted of all charges. Once again, he was free, but he knew that he couldn't stay in the United States. He was now a fugitive from justice, and he needed to get out of the country. He fled to Italy and lived there under the false identity of Michael Corleone.
Ow.
He spent several years traveling around the country, avoiding the authorities, but in 2020 he was tracked down and arrested, was extradited back to the US and returned to prison. But this time things were different. The government decided to keep him locked up for good. On September 22, 2021, Franzese was found dead in his cell at the Federal Correctional Institution in North Carolina. He was 85 years old. At the time of his death, he was serving a 10-year sentence for racketeering and extortion. According to the Bureau of Prisons, Franzese died of natural causes. But many people believe that he was actually the victim of foul play. After all, he had made a lot of enemies during his lifetime, and there were many people who would have wanted him dead. Considering that he was already 85 years old and had a history of heart problems, it's likely that he simply died of a heart attack or stroke. However, the fact that he was in prison and had made so many enemies over the years means that foul play cannot be ruled out. But what about the story about him giving orders from inside a coffin? Well, it turns out that this is actually true. In 1997, Franzese was indicted on racketeering charges. He was afraid that he would be convicted and sent to prison for life. So he decided to take drastic measures, paid a hit squad $50,000 to kill him, and then he faked his own death. The hit squad buried him in a shallow grave in Queens, but the next day he was dug up and brought to a hospital. He had been shot in the head, but he survived. Franzese then testified against his former associates, which led to their convictions. But he was also given a lengthy prison sentence of 10 years. It was only after he agreed to cooperate that his sentence was reduced. But this incident shows just how far the Mafia will go to protect their own. Even after Franzese had betrayed them, they still saw him as one of their own and were willing to kill him rather than see him testify against them. The story of Mafia boss Michael Franzese is a wild ride from the highest levels of organized crime to the depths of betrayal and murder. And we help but wonder if this larger-than-life figure might have actually been giving orders from a coffin at some point in his career. While some aspects of his story are disputed, one thing is for sure. Franzese was a major player in the Mafia, and his story is a fascinating look into the world of organized crime. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to catch our next release. Until then, see you next time.